So welcome back to I believe this is episode 5 now of Cyprus Asking People Things. What was once going to be a singular thing has now turned into a series, which I'm very happy about. And I hope everybody here listening is happy about too, I guess. But anyway, I have got Daniel Cottier, stage manager extraordinaire with me. But I'll let Dan take it away and if he wants to explain a little bit about himself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm a 28-year-old stage manager and writer and producer and director. And today we're recording at the Hayes Theatre. So we're lucky enough to be recording this on the grounds of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. So I just want to pay my respects to any elders past, present or emerging who are listening to this and say hi. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for having us. And it's exciting that it's a 5-part. It's nice to be the 5th.
Well, again, thank you so much for coming on, Dan. You know, I'm really excited to have you on because we've been working together for a little bit now, and I just find your story incredibly interesting, like with everybody else in this theatre. But, thank you very much for coming on. Now, you said you're a stage manager, producer. Did you actually seek to be in the theatre prior to, becoming a stage manager? Do you feel like being in the theatre has actually brought you a sense of family and a sense of community that you might not have once had, or?
Well, I'm really lucky in that I discovered the theatre when I was in year 2 because my mum was the sort of creative arts teacher at my primary school. And so she was directing a production of The Hobbit, and it was the same year that The Lord of the Rings was coming out in cinemas. And they needed someone to run on and take off the door for Bag End, the big green door. And so that was my job. That's all I did in the show. Was I was there for the first 10 minutes and then I had to go back to class. And I took off the door, and I remember taking off the door and having to go back to class, and I was so ecstatic. I was just like over the moon that like I'd taken off the door and it had gone smoothly, and it was amazing. And yeah, so that was like a really magical experience in year 2. And from that, my teacher was like, okay, he's got a lot of energy. Maybe put him into some sort of theatre program. And I grew up in a rural town just outside of Newcastle. So we drive in on weekends. And from year 3 till year 12, I did drama classes once a week in Newcastle. And that gave me a really beautiful group of friends, especially throughout high school when I got bullied a lot at school and I didn't have a lot of friends at school. On a Saturday, I'd go in and, rehearse in the theatre for whatever the show was that we were doing. I was the oldest dwarf in a production of Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. I was 4 years older than the others because I was still short. And in that production was Matt Predney, who has worked at the Hayes before, and a whole bunch of other people. So that sort of gave me a family really early on. And from that, when I graduated high school, went to Wollongong Uni and studied acting. So I've got my Bachelor of Performance in Acting from UOW. And I came to Sydney and acted in a few Sydney Fringe shows, and just made more friends and sort of got to know people. And I was working at the Opera House in the bar, and the part that I was working in got shut down. So they had to move all the staff to another spot. And so I got moved to the green room. And everyone was like, oh, this is amazing. The green room, you're going to meet the actors. You're going to get such good connections. And I was like, yeah, all right, sure. All right, yeah, because that's how it works. Shut up. But anyway, Mitchell Butel, I know, it's tragic, but Mitchell Butel was there and he was doing Arms and the Man, and I just decided he was going to be my friend. And so he'd come in and get his pasta every day, and I'd chat to him. And then, anyway, eventually he just started doing some directing work as well. And so I was like, I'm a director, because that's sort of, the goal, is to direct and write. And I was like, I'm a director, so if you've got any projects that you sort of need someone to come on, just let me know, like as an assistant. And he was very kind. And so that went on for 3 years. And then he finally was like, oh yeah, I've got something for you. which was great. And in that time, I'd moved to England for 6 months, which hadn't really worked out. And then I was living in Newcastle and running a sort of pro-am company there with some friends. And we were a really tight-knit little group, and we were just trying to make really good works of like artworks with who we had in Newcastle, and like finding really interesting people and elevating them and working out, what the coolest spaces in Newcastle would be that we could use. So it was a lot of fun, and yeah, it's given me a real sense of community. But the important part about Mitchell is that then I'd moved back to Sydney, and we'd sort of disbanded the company in Newcastle, and I messaged him and said, "Do you need an assistant?" He said, "Yes, I actually do at the moment." So I went in and assisted him on Candide at the Opera House, which was amazing. And on that, I was they didn't have a stage manager for rehearsals. So I just sort of did it because training in community theatre, that's what you know how to kind of
Yes.
sort of do everything. So I did that, and then from that, I got asked to interview for Aspects of Love at the Hayes.
Wow.
And then I went in and they said, "Can you read music?" And I said, "Oh, I can follow it." I couldn't tell you what a crotchet is, but like if it's got lyrics, I can follow the line pretty closely. And they're like, "Great, you got the job." So literally with not even the bare minimum got the job, which was heavenly. Yeah, and that was my introduction to the Hayes, which has sort of become my family, my sort of Sydney-based family,
Yes.
for the last 4 years. Yeah, for the last few years, which has been really amazing.
Yeah, it is. And when you're entering into these new spaces, because even though you're going from theatre to theatre, and theatres in a sense you are familiar with that, it's always new people. New productions, always new people, which I'd also spoken to with last podcast with Andrew. Do you have any tips for people wanting to engage in friendships when you're actually in this other side of the stage, where Andrew is constantly communicating with everybody because he has to as an actor? As a stage manager, how have you found, being up the back, how have you combated that? What can be a lonely job? How have you sort of circumvented that?
Well, we're really lucky at the Hayes in that you're up there with the sound operator. So I've always been with Anthony Lorenz or Guy de Mesa or Josh Giuliano. And so that's nice. But we've also got, I find my assistant stage managers, just get really lucky, and I either work with the same people or I get really, really lucky with having new people who I get on really well with. And I think that's a relationship that you've got to foster as well with the actors, is just showing them, the producers have chosen me and said that I'm the right person for this job. So, here's what I've got. If you need anything, come to me. But also I can see these problems coming up. So
Yeah.
here's a solution for that before we get to the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I've definitely found that as well, working in a few productions now, and what I love about theatre is it's finding solutions to problems. It's never, oh, that'll get dealt with later. I'm sure that happens.
But when that happens, when I hear that'll get dealt with later, in my head it goes, "Oh, okay, that'll be me that deals with it later." So then in the moment I make a plan, which I think is important. I think if you can see an iceberg on the horizon, you've got to start sailing around it as soon as possible, rather than
Yes.
being like, "Oh, it's getting really close. Oh, that's okay. We'll just wait till we run into it."
I really like that saying. If you see an iceberg on the horizon, start steering. Within theatre, as we both know, it is like a kitchen. There are high pressure situations, and tensions can rise really quickly, especially when things aren't working, when they need to work, because as we know, we only have 3 weeks of rehearsals, including the band rehearsals, and then we're in previews. So there's a lot of pressure to get stuff done really quickly. How do you find actually working with the directors, the musical directors, the assistants, and the rest of the team? How do you, for one, mitigate the anxiety? because I feel anxiety when those tensions arise, but I have breathing techniques and whatnot. So one, the anxiety that comes with that, but two, also the interpersonal relationships that you have to maintain after the rehearsal and after those potential conflicts.
I My strategy is because I get quite bad anxiety, and I've got OCD. So like, but not OCD in sort of the cleaning way. Like I get really anxious and stuck in an anxious thought. So I've got my own strategies to be able to be really in the moment, especially in a tech. I think it's important. You've got to be really in the moment, sort of know what your time structures are. I find I've got to have really early on set when the breaks will be, and I have to stick to that so that then I can look at my day and what we need to achieve in that day and work to it. And I also, and so far this hasn't got me in trouble, but I'm sure eventually it will. I also am a big fan of just if someone's getting, anxious about something, or if they're, because it's an anxious thing, you've got to deliver this product by this time, and this is the time you have to do it. So if anyone's getting super anxious or is sort of in need of like a little calm down or something, I'm not afraid to be like, okay, let's just take a breath. That's my favorite saying in tech is, all right, let's just take a breath. And sometimes it's not said as kindly as that. Sometimes it's, let's take a breath, just because it just brings us all back to our bodies of going, oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, like you said, breathing techniques, and just like remember that we're all working together. It's not, the way I see a show is that everyone is working together in unison to create something amazing for an audience. So that's, in tech, you just need to be like, all right, guys, come on, we're all working together to make something. But I worked on a show, and I was filling in for a stage manager because they had dropped out at the last minute. And so my first day was the tech, and then first preview. So we started tech, I think, at 1:00, and first preview was at 6:30 was our call. And there wasn't an archival or anything for me to watch.
Wow.
So I had the prompt copy and just sort of went in and was like, right, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what's about to come at me. You've just got to just buckle up and make it work. You've got till this time to do it. And we just made it through to dinner break and fit everything in. But probably the first hour was really stressful, and I just felt totally overwhelmed. And it was at the Opera House, so I just thought, if this all goes pear-shaped, I can just open the doors, run out and just jump in the harbour and swim away, and just no one has to see me again. Heaven. But, that day succeeded, and it was a success. Yes. And so from that moment, or from that day, that experience, I thought, okay, great. If we've got 3 days of tech, heaven. If we've got 1 day of tech, sure. Like, you just take what you've got and do your best with it. But I'm also big on, I've done a lot of work around shame and shame resilience within my own personal life. And so I think a lot of the time we want things perfect in tech straight away. They need to be perfect, perfect, perfect. And I am less interested in perfect and more interested in okay, that wasn't right, but I know where it needs to be. So on the next attempt, let's get it closer. Because shows have a really long life, and stage managers have to watch it every night. So if there's a lighting cue or something that you don't feel totally comfortable with, it's really fun over a couple of shows to sort of work out exactly where that goes.
Yep.
There's one in Merrily where I used to do it on the downbeat of a song, and then I realised that if I did it 2 seconds later, then it follows the character as she sits, rather than her going a little dark in the face and then sitting into the light. And so it's really fun discoveries like that might come after tech. But there's time after, and that's important to remember. You've got time after, and nothing needs to be perfect day one. You just need to know where it goes and what your cue should be, and for me, what the effect is, because I didn't train in stage management, so I come at it as a director, and so I say, all right, what is this lighting cue doing to tell the story? And then that helps. That helps a lot when you're like, oh, okay, it's diverting the audience's eyes here so that something surprising can happen here. Great. So that needs to happen at this moment because that's when whatever upstage is happening.
Yes.
Yes, that's my approach.
Yeah, it's I'm really glad to actually hear that as well, because being a drummer in that perspective, but also trying to also think about the bigger picture from the pit per se, filling in those little things that you might not get within the first few plays of a show. Also, when you're putting the show together in your mind, like it took me a while to understand the scope of Merrily.
Mm-hmm.
Not being able to see it in like from the front, but when I started to get the essence of, oh, okay, this is what this character is doing, this is what this character is doing, this is where I need to push it and pull it, with the assistance of Andrew, the director, the musical director, and then adding in these other little things that I've noticed everybody starts to do. Like everybody starts to do these little offers. And I'll offer something, and I've noticed, and the person who was playing Gussie, she would slow down for a particular transition and would go with the band for that, and that wasn't part of the direction at all. And all of those things that happen over the run of a show, it just keeps it being fun.
Yeah, it does. And it's fun. There's a line that I have to do an audio cue that fades out, and the director wants it on a particular word, and the actors now started saying that line differently. So
Yes.
now I just have to be really in the moment with him and be like, okay, he's going to pause, go, and it's working it out that way. It's really fun, reverse engineering.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how do you then, when the tensions rise, how do you actually start to, if it's say towards you or between people, and that's happening in a rehearsal space, how do you as a stage manager start to diffuse that if it needs to be?
It's tough. If it's someone speaking directly to me, I'll just take them aside and be like, I'm sorry, that's not how I work. So
Yes.
here are my boundaries, and this is how I'll be spoken to, and I will speak to you in the same way, which is good, I think. Other people, it's a little harder. Sometimes you have to mediate a little bit or just go up to someone and be like, I think this person's having a tough time and I don't think that they appreciate it when you speak to them this way, which is always good. But it's just about communication, I find, because sometimes, everyone's searching for their perfection in whatever department they are. Like if that's what they're searching for is perfection, then they sometimes forget that they're in a team, they're in a group. And so you just need to be like, hey, this person who's in your group isn't appreciating how you're speaking to them, or, isn't appreciating this moment when you do this. Can we modify that? Can we work on it? And then
Yes.
usually people are amenable.
Yes, most definitely, because it's sometimes quite to navigate that social sphere, because you have to have a certain sense of self-awareness to do these acting roles.
Yeah, well, everything you do on that stage is going to be reflected back at you by someone. Someone's going to have a note about pretty much every moment. So
Yes.
it's understandable. It's a super vulnerable job and a super vulnerable industry that we work in, and vulnerability is really scary. So if every moment could get written about in a review that then goes into a paper that you then can't argue with, I kind of get it. I kind of get the wanting to be like, oh no, I need to guard myself a little bit. Friendship wise, I don't drink, and I think that helps me a lot.
Really?
I don't drink, so I don't get drunk and accidentally go up to someone, which I used to do at uni, and be like, do you know what your problem is? Like, because that doesn't help. That doesn't help. So if someone's annoying or whatever, just take a few days of not talking to them so much, and that helps me, that I find. But so far, I like everyone that I've worked with, which is really good. Like, I've been really, really lucky with the shows that I've done.
Yeah. And it's always helpful that almost all of us are in an industry that we want to be in.
Which is great.
So we're all here trying to achieve to the best of our abilities, almost all of the time, for the same goal. We don't want to unintentionally tread on each other. We can definitely accidentally do it.
Oh, yeah.
But
And if someone does that, I encourage the person who's accidentally trod on to say, hey, I didn't appreciate that moment. We look at ourselves as individuals and we forget that sometimes it just needs to come down a little bit.
as stated at the start of this podcast, you've written a book and releasing a serialized podcast of it onto every which way, including Audible.
Yes, which is so exciting. Like originally I looked up how to produce it as an audiobook and just put it straight onto Audible, and I couldn't, like, facilitating that seemed really difficult. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll get this podcast server thing, whatever it is, and then I put it up there, and then it somehow does it and sends it to things, and then it sent it to Audible, and I was like,
wow.
oh my God, I've made it. I feel I've arrived, which is super exciting.
But before we go on,
Yes.
the book is called?
Yeah, yes.
So I noticed it's yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I'll put it in the description.
Oh, thank you.
So the book is your struggles as a gay queer person throughout the plebiscite in 2017. And do you feel like the skills and the journey you've taken throughout theatre helped you through that? You know, having the friends around you, did that help?
Yeah, I think so. So the book is about a person who's very isolated and they don't have a community. So I've only released 2 chapters so far. But you learn that really early on, is that this person, Joe, doesn't really have a sense of community and doesn't really have many friends or anything. And we'll be finding out soon that it's during the plebiscite and the marriage equality debate. In that time for myself, I was working in a theatre. I was running the bars at the Civic Theatre in Newcastle whilst also producing and directing shows. And I found it did help. We watched the announcement on the 15th of November at the Civic Theatre in the foyer with a whole bunch of the staff and stuff, and the cafe was open that day, and this lady came in, she was like, hello, can I please get some service? And I was like, go away. Come back in 20 minutes. So she didn't get served, sorry. So we probably lost a customer, but we gained marriage equality, so whatever, I don't care. But yeah, no, theatre was a big part of my life during that time. And that night, my best friend Steph, who she was my AD on heaps of things in Newcastle, we went to the beach and celebrated together.
Excellent.
And she and I met in year 3 at that drama class, and our birthdays are 2 days apart, and we've been friends since we were, I think, 9 is year 3. I think 9 is year 3.
Yeah, something like that.
Since we were 9, and we're now, she's 27 and I'm 28. So
wow.
Yeah. So from that I've gotten a really long, beautiful friendship from starting out as, I think she played a witch and I played a goblin in our showcase at the end of the year. And I was very excited because I'd had all those goblin practices in The Hobbit.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So through working at the theatre, as I've seen through multiple other people and heard through multiple other people, you need quite a wide skill set to actually be a part of any production. You know, if you have something you can offer to do and to help, it will most likely be utilized in some way. And as you are a multi-talented person, dramaturgy, stage management, writing, performing, producing, do you find that this skill set has helped you fit more into these jobs per se? You know, being able to pull from your acting experience onto the stage.
Yeah, I think so. So stage management, I sort of have learned mostly intuitively, doing it and watching other people do it. And part of that is when you work at the Hayes, there's not a huge team. So if you're the stage manager, you've got to do the schedule, you've got to mend the clothes as they come in, you've got to wash them at the end of the night, you've got to clean the set. If a prop breaks, you've got to go and source another one. You've got to make, Emma has really great recipes for making champagne, which we have to make every night, and hors d'oeuvres. So you just kind of need to, I find at the level that I'm at particularly, you just need to be able to say yes to things. So yeah, just have that ability to go, Right. I saw on the TV once that someone did this, so I will have a crack at that. Oh, great. That worked great. And now I've fixed something. When we were working at the Opera House on Candide, we needed to attach some money bags that could be really easily unattached.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, what have we got? We've got 2 bobby pins. Right. So we just like put some string around the bobby pin and the bag and hooked it up to his suspenders, and then you've got your thing. And so it's just about looking at the materials you've got. I find looking at the materials you've got and going, okay, so this is the solution, or this is the issue we've got. How do we use this to make that? Which is really exciting.
And so, what would you say to people who are actually wanting to go into stage management, stagehand, assistant stage management, the plethora of other things that are involved in theatre, musical, or plays? Um, what would you say to them that they need to say would have helped you if you had more pre-preparation, and what is some good attitudes to actually have while on the job?
Preparation wise, find a stage manager and ask them for copies of their paperwork templates, because they are so helpful rather than trying to make your own. If you're working with someone who has worked on another big show, ask them for a copy of that show's stage management, like show report template or whatever, and then just work to that, because that's a system that they already know, and that's good. That works out really well. Keep all your documentation really up to date. It's so boring, but it's so important, because you never know when things are going to have another life, and if you're going to be able to be there for it.
Yes, most definitely. It's quite the same with drums, in the sense of there's actually a lot of organization that goes into building the kit, making sure all of the sound effects are there, and making sure to save them.
Yeah,
So
totally.
if a show gets
Always
remounted.
save things, and always have a copy of the show file, which is all the lights. Always have a copy on a USB separately. Put it in I used to staple mine in a plastic sleeve in the front of the prompt copy. But attitude wise, I think just say yes. When an issue comes up, don't say, oh, that's not my department. Like, be part of the solution, I
Yeah.
find, because a lot of the time I hear people be like, oh, that's not really my department. And
Yeah.
I think, well, who else is,
Yeah.
contribute to the solution? Yeah.
That's definitely a big part of the music industry as a whole. If you just dive into all these other little things, you definitely find you have more of a chance of getting more work, but also finding more of that respect that can come from just, I'll help.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like when stuff goes wrong, if you've already proven that you can fix things, if you've proven that you can come up with a solution really quickly, people just trust you as a stage manager. They just trust that like, oh, something's gone wrong. That's all right. We'll get through it. Like the other day, 2 of our lights broke
Wow.
at interval. So interval went for 25 minutes while we solved it, and we let the cast know. But they weren't particularly like nervous or vexed about it, because they knew what the problem was, again, communication. And they knew that we, if they were in a spot that was dark or whatever, we'd just jump ahead to a lighting queue where they were lit. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
we had their backs and we know what's going on. Knowing the show is the most important thing, actually, I've got to say, is the most important thing of being a stage manager. I think partly because I can't read music, and I do a lot of shows
Yeah.
where it's all to the score.
Yes.
Listening to it over and over again, especially in rehearsals. Rehearsals can be so boring when it's just like going over the same line or whatever. But use that time to let it go in so that you know it by heart.
Yes.
Yeah, if you know it by heart, then you intuitively know, like, okay, so they're going to want a light on the da 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 light, da 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 light, da 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 light, da 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 go. And so you know that rhythm already. You don't need to get into tech and go, oh, what's the
Yeah.
sorry, no, the rhythm's what? And yeah, so if you
Yes.
know the rhythm of everything and it's all in your heart, yeah, it makes life so much easier.
You've explained a lot of techniques throughout this podcast. If you could boil them down to say 5 effective things that have helped you run a show, what would they be?
1, knowing the show.
Mm.
2, keeping your paperwork together. 3, keeping your collaborators together, keeping everyone on side and particularly on your side. 4, being able to fix problems and seeing problems before there are a problem.
The iceberg.
Seeing the iceberg and going, uh-oh. And 5 would be, stage management. You always get sweaty. You always get sweat. Like, I used to be like, why do techies always have BO? It is because they're working their guts out. They are and it's a high stress job, like you said. Have deodorant with you. Have deodorant and be ready to have some wet wipes as well, and you can just do your underarms when you get a break. Definitely recommend that because it keeps people on side as well.
Thank you very much, Dan. There's actually some recording going on in here.
There is.
So
we were here first, though.
We were. I really appreciate you coming on this podcast and, just for me personally, shining a light on another part of this industry. It's like something I wouldn't have known anything about.
Thank you. Well, stage managers, I always hope at the Sydney Theatre Awards that one year they'll be like, okay, all the stage managers stand up, and then they just give them a round of applause, because it is sort of your first one there, your last one to leave, and you don't really get a lot of love for it. So any stage managers listening, thank you for all of your work. I love what you do, and it's essential what you do. So, mwah.
Yes, and I really appreciate it too. We have had Daniel Cottier on this podcast. Don't forget to look up his book, which is /yes. It'll be in the description. I've already said I'm going to have other people on. Enjoy this whenever you're listening to it, morning, noon, or night.
And if it is night, good night. Mwah.